Hey, Dog Nation, I'm Brandon Adams. Welcome into our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore here at the UGA Bookstore. We'll react to the Georgia win against Samford from a few moments ago, and I'm not going to lie to you. This is kind of one of those days a little bit where you're kind of left to wonder, like, what all of this really was. I mean, I think my key takeaway is I'm not quite so sure why this game is even being played, and that's been obviously a big debate about, Georgia and teams from the SEC against FCS-level foes, and should those games still be taking place, and Kirby Smart weighed in on that this week. Good to see you guys. Thanks for coming by. Kirby Smart's kind of weighed in on that. Well, I think today is a reminder of why that is a discussion, about why that's one of those things that is going to keep being talked about here, because Georgia won. I don't think there's anything to really criticize Georgia for. I don't know there's anything to necessarily overly praise Georgia for. It was 60 minutes of football, and now it's over, and you sort of now start getting ready to move on to the games that matter most on the road at South Carolina next week, the SEC slate that follows that. This was one of those games. I think maybe the most indicative moment of the entire game is the fact that the fourth quarter was reduced from 15 minutes down to 12. Two teams that were clearly ready to get out of here there on that. I mean, I think for me, there were probably three key football takeaways on this. Then we'll bring on Terrence Edwards. We'll talk to him more about this in a moment, and we'll talk to you there too. So if you're watching on Facebook or YouTube or DogNation.com, whichever comment section you check in on, we'll talk to you on those comment sections here tonight. And you'll have a chance to be a part of the show and join the show. But as far as like my overall football takes from what goes down, I think that the Georgia defensive performance is impressive. Getting the shutout in this situation, that is an impressive thing, despite the fact that the team that you're playing is obviously really of not much count whatsoever. It's an FCS foe. It was clearly overmatched FCS foe. But, this is a Samford team that didn't cross midfield until really the fourth quarter of the game. Didn't even get in a threat to score or be in a position for anything like that until pretty late in the game. And so for a Georgia defense that last week only yielded 3 points in the game against Oregon to come back and have a similar showing in a game like this against Samford, even if it's a big step down in competition, I think overall that's probably a pretty impressive performance. I think offensively, one of the things I remember saying on Friday on Dog Nation Daily was that in a game in which you think Georgia could pretty much do whatever it wants, that whatever it chooses to do must be what it wants to do. Well, once again, this was a game in which Georgia spread the ball around to a lot of different receivers. You saw a lot of different guys touch it. You saw Sept and Bennett, passing in excess of 300 yards and involving a lot of receivers in the passing game when he did. And at least for now, that seems to be the overall MO for what Georgia wants to do. They're going to involve multiple tight ends. They did that again today. They're going to involve multiple wide receivers. Obviously, that was a part of it. Once again, throwing to running backs out of the backfield, making them pass-catching targets. Right now, this is a Georgia offense that's looking to distribute the football around to a lot of different guys. That seems to be the story for what they want to do. And yet, with that said, even today, kind of a replica of last Saturday where a lot of receivers touched the ball, a lot of guys got involved, I think once again you're left to conclude that if Georgia is ever threatened, whether it be in the regular season or sometime in the postseason, somewhere beyond that, I think you're left to conclude that the most dangerous pass-catching weapon on this roster does remain Brock Bowers, that he's still the guy that this team will throw the ball to when it really needs to make a big completion. His numbers today aren't eye-popping. I think he had 3 catches. But when he does have the football in his hand, when he's doing what he's doing, that is still a guy that kind of shows you that extra spark, with no disrespect to anybody else. I think that even on a day like this where kind of the overall performance kind of leaves you, the kind of game you sort of see, you watch, you process it for a couple of minutes, then maybe you just sort of move on to the next thing. That was one of my takeaways. I was also really impressed with what I saw from Kendall Milton today, too. I think the overall stat line for Kenny McIntosh is really impressive. I don't want to take away from McIntosh. We'll certainly talk more about him in a moment. But I think that Kendall Milton kind of showed you that extra burst in terms of getting those hard yards. And this was a day in which I still sort of thought maybe the Georgia rushing attack maybe left a little something to be desired. I don't say that from like some sort of critical standpoint or anything like that. I mean this from the standpoint of if you're really kind of hoping to see that group really come out and have a huge flex today. I don't quite know that you got that. But when Milton had the football, he kind of showed you the spark of why there is so much excitement for him, now that he's healthy again. I think it was kind of a revelation last week to see him find the end zone the way that he did, and obviously coming back and getting some pretty impressive performances here today. I think that's one of the names that I'd probably highlight as what stood out to me. I thought Kendall Milton with the football in his hand certainly looked pretty good as he did all of that. So those are some of my early thoughts. We'll start lining up your phone calls there as well. Don't forget, we kind of crossed over a new horizon from a technology standpoint last week when it comes to taking your phone calls and having you join us via Zoom. So you'll see a link in the Facebook and the YouTube and the DogNation.com comment section, and that'll be your invitation to join us, and we'll hear from you live, and you can react to what you saw. And if you feel like there was a huge takeaway, a big point that needs to be made, we'll give you a chance to do that on the basis of how that goes down for Georgia and Samford here today. We'll also read some of your comments in kind of the traditional formats we have in the past and let you weigh in there, and we're going to hear in just a moment from former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards, too, and we'll get his thoughts on that. In fact, we have Terrence ready to go right now. So before I bring him in, let me remind you who we are, what we're doing, and we'll hear from Terrence Edwards on this in a moment. We're live here at the UGA bookstore after a 33-0 win for Georgia against Samford here today. And, of course, before we got going on our show, before the game today, the UGA bookstore had a huge collection of autograph signings here a little earlier. Malcolm Mitchell was here. Vince Dooley was here. Buck Bellew was here there as well. Well, guess what? There's even more of those coming up next time that Georgia is back between the hedges when they take on Kent State coming up in a couple of weeks. That's 2 weeks from now. UGA Bookstore is going to be hosting more great autograph signings there as well. How about Richard LeCount from the Cleveland Browns? He's going to be here on that day. Also, Buck Bellew, Vince Dooley, Malcolm Mitchell going to be back signing their books there again there as well. That's from 9:30 until 11:30, 2 weeks from now when the Golden Flashes of Kent State come to Athens. We'll be back here at the UGA bookstore ready for that. And by the way, the shirt that I'm wearing today, how good is the Georgia G look on this red Nike shirt? Of course, there's a black version of this and a gray version of this right down the first floor at the UGA bookstore. All that great apparel is for sale there. And so you can check that out, and you can find that right down there on the first floor. Of course, all the great brands, not just Nike like the coaches wear, but how about the Vineyard Vines, Tommy Bahama, the UGA 10 line from Peter Millar, the Johnny O. I saw a guy wearing a Johnny O shirt the other day from the UGA bookstore that I thought looked amazing. There's just some great UGA apparel right down there on the first floor of the UGA bookstore, so I hope you'll check that out when you're here in town, getting ready for a game. It is truly a great place to get stocked up on all that great UGA apparel. Make sure you check that out at the UGA bookstore. Also, don't forget to check that link. Get in the conversation. We'll bring you on here in just a moment. For now, though, let's get Terrence's take. It is the former Georgia wide receiver Terrence Edwards who joins us here on the Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. Terrence, I hate to have this attitude, and I'm sure that your opinion on this will kind of help clarify some things for us, but this is one of those games that I have to say I just think is sort of mostly forgettable. I don't know that Georgia did anything all that terrible today, but I don't know that Georgia did anything that necessarily had fans sort of diving out of their seats to high-five each other. You don't really take wins for granted, but my gosh, it is a huge step down in terms of energy and enthusiasm when you're playing in Mercedes-Benz Stadium last Saturday and you're beating the number 11 team in the country. At least that's what they were ranked coming into the game. When you're beating Oregon the way that you did last Saturday, major step down in competition today. This game was never really close. This game was never really any kind of threat to Georgia whatsoever, and I don't know that Georgia played poorly in response to all that, but I don't know that years from now we'll be looking back on this Samford game with much in the way of memories whatsoever. What was your key takeaway with what you saw today?
This is something I talked about on the show on Thursday. I mean, it's you spend all summer getting ready for the upcoming season, getting ready to play a team like Oregon, getting ready to face Dan Lanning, someone that you're very familiar with. Then it's just very hard to get 17, 18-year-olds to bring that same type of oomph to a game like Samford. Even though we won 33-0, it just wasn't the same pizzazz as it was last week. The best thing we come out kind of injury free. We gotta wait to see how A.D. Mitchell situation turns out, but we got a lot of people playing time today. The guy that I've been hyping up, Dylan Bell, got his first touchdown. So I saw a lot of positive from a lot of young guys, and that's what you want to see in these type of games.
Yeah, I think you're bringing up some good points, and I think when you talk about what was interesting about today's game, the performance of Dylan Bell, who came very close to getting another touchdown, and that would certainly have kind of cemented his day even more, but you did call out Dylan Bell a lot during the preseason as a guy that you thought would be kind of the next of those maybe less than fully heralded recruits who made a name for themselves. That's what A.D. Mitchell and Ladd McConkey did a year ago, and you thought that Dylan Bell had a chance to be that for this team here this year. Well, based on what he showed you today, there's a reason why he was getting some of that buzz during the summertime, and your prediction seems to have been validated on that. There's no doubt Bell has the credentials to play for this team. Now, Georgia's also deep at wide receiver right now. They can play a lot of guys. But Dylan Bell, I do think, I don't want to call it a pleasant surprise anymore because you've been telling us about this for quite some time, but in terms of going out and bringing in a player for the 2022 class that you feel like you can put on the field and play as a true freshman, that is what Dylan Bell showed himself to be able to do today. And Terrence, beyond that, for the exact reason that you said that he would, and the fact that he kind of brings that big body to the table. He looks a little bit like a running back. He does have that extra muscle mass that obviously helps when you're playing the wide receiver position. I found myself watching the game today thinking, wow, this really is a lot of what Terrence had been telling us about during the preseason.
Oh, most definitely. And you can see that he's been trusted because he was in the game very, very early today, and maybe in the first series. So the coaching staff trusts this young man to put him in position to go out there and make plays, and that's I feel like that he understands the game plan. If he didn't understand what the objective was, he wouldn't be out there so early. So, like I said, I'm not in the film room, in the classroom with him, and I don't know how well he understands the playbook. Obviously, he understands all those things very well. I'm just looking at it from a talented trait. The kid has the opportunity to be really, really good, and kind of remind me of Hines a little bit, just the way he plays the game, that thick, hard nose. They put him in a lot for blocking situations, so he kind of remind me of Hines in that sense.
I think that's exactly right. That's really interesting. And by the way, if you're watching us right now, you want to be a part of the conversation, there's a Zoom link on whatever video channel you happen to be watching on. You can click that Zoom link and you can do that. And thank you, sir. Good to see you. Thanks for being here today. Good to see you. I told you, if you come by the show, it used to be we were like really locked in on the camera and we're just kind of focused in on that. If you come by here, we'll say hello to you and we'll kind of break the fourth wall and greet you there a little bit. It's always nice to hear from great dog fans as they stop by and see us here at the UGA bookstore. But to kind of follow up on Terrence's point there a little bit, you like what you saw from Bell. And Terrence, when I look around the rest of this sort of pass-catching targets and the guys that are there, by kind of a quick count of the stat sheet, I see 15 different Bulldogs that caught passes today. And if we operate on the assumption that Georgia could pretty much do today anything it wanted to, and whatever it did do then must be kind of what it wants to do, much like the Oregon game from a week ago, this to me right now seems like the kind of team that wants to get a lot of different guys involved. They're not going to lean heavily on maybe one guy right now to the to the exclusion of others. It seems like Georgia right now, whether it be Stetson Bennett in the game, obviously we saw some of Carson Beck late, but this Georgia passing attack is sort of comfortable throwing to pretty much whoever the open man is right now. I do think that's also probably one of the positive takeaways for today's game as well.
Oh, most definitely. No, when you have one guy, defense tends to try to, we're going to take this guy away and allow the other receivers to beat us. When you have a team that completed 15 passes to 15 different receivers, you really can't lock in on one specific player and say we're going to take him out the game, because we're getting valuable experience for these other guys to make plays in crucial situations. So that was very unique to me to have that many guys catch that many passes in a game, but you're getting these guys valuable experience that they're going to need later on in the year.
I want to go out and give our Player of the Game award here. It's from Wilson PC Attorneys at Law, and you're talking about Kenny McIntosh, who had 6 catches today to go along with an impressive performance there on the ground as well. We're going to make Kenny McIntosh our Player of the Game, and certainly congratulations to Kenny on that. We appreciate the Wilson PC Personal Injuries Attorneys making our Player of the Game award possible here on the Dog Nation Postgame Show live from the UGA bookstore. Of course, Atlanta can happen from out of nowhere, and those of you that live in the Atlanta area know that. So when the unexpected happens to you, call the Wilson PC Personal Injury Attorneys at 888-838-YOU-WIN. That's 888-838-YOU-WIN. or visit them online at atlantahappens.com. I think it's a very creative web address, by the way. You can check out atlantahappens.com because the streets are unpredictable, and when something like that happens to you, you need a lawyer you can trust, a friend that's got your back no matter what, and the expertise of someone who's seen it all. That's what our friends at the Wilson PC personal injuries attorneys are always about. So give them a call, 888-838-YOU-WIN. That's 888-838-YOU-WIN. Or check them out online at atlantahappens.com. We appreciate the Wilson PC personal injury attorneys bringing our Player of the Game award to us. Congratulations to Kenny McIntosh for winning that today. And Terrence, to keep the McIntosh conversation going, this is another day today where he is a very effective weapon out of the passing game. And I think that was one of the big takeaways last Saturday against Oregon, is that we know that the running back position for Georgia, from a talent standpoint, one of the deepest positions on this team, and yet the way in which they were used a week ago was as weapons out of the passing attack. And once again, this week following up, different level of opponent, different level of intensity of the game, but once again, Georgia pretty content to throw to those running backs, to be creative in how they're using them. I think after 2 games here, Terrence, we're 1/6 of the way through the regular season after today. I think after 2 games here, I think you can pretty well establish that that's what Georgia wants to do this year. They want to throw to those backs. Kirby Smart's talked about being kind of a factory or a proving ground, breeding ground for NFL running backs. That's what guys do in the NFL. And I think after 2 games, Terrence, I think you can pretty clearly say that's what Georgia wants to do with its running backs here too.
I think so. I was having a conversation with someone this week, and we're talking about the how many catches the running back had last week, and now with the running backs having how many catches they had with. But it's an extension of the running game. You're not going to have a lot of guys anymore running from the I formation, running it 20 to 25 times a game. You're going to get 20 to 25 touches a game, but now the game is about spacing. Just like in basketball, you're just trying to get shooters around and hit 3 points. Now it's about getting running backs out in space against linebackers and maybe bigger safeties and see, can you cover those guys in space? See, can Kenny McIntosh put his foot in the ground and make the guy miss it? For the first 2 games, he's done an excellent job so far catching the football out the backfield.
If you want to join us here on our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore here at the UGA bookstore, you can do that here today. There's a link in the video comment section or in the comment section of the video platform that you're watching on, Facebook or dognation.com or on YouTube. Good to see you guys. Thanks for coming by. Good to see y'all tonight. You can check out that link in the comment section there. Click that. Get into the comment section. You can weigh in. You can share your thoughts here this evening. Christy over at Dog Nation, or I should say on the Dog Nation YouTube page, Christy checks in and says that she wants the version of Georgia that played Oregon to show up when maybe Georgia plays a team like Kentucky, who she believes will be a tougher opponent later on in the season. And I guess, Terrence, along those lines, and you touched on this a moment ago, that as a player yourself, you say, well, you're not going to have necessarily the same level of intensity tonight that you would have maybe had last Saturday against Oregon. But did you see any kind of deficiencies there? Were you satisfied with how Georgia played? Did you think that Georgia did leave something lacking today in terms of its overall mental approach to this game?
I just understand, the mindset it takes to get up for a team like Samford. I played in games that you just knew you just better than an opponent, and it's just tough to get up for this type of game. And that's what I talked about last week, DA, was where's the leadership on this team to now allow these young guys to take anyone for granted? You have to go out there week in and week out and be consistent. So I wasn't too upset with the way they played today. We wasn't as sharp as we were last week, and that's just to be expected. At the end of the day, we scored points. We scored on each possession. The defense got a shutout. You saw those guys still was having fun, flying around. And that's all I can ask for. We got South Carolina next week, and the level of focus it's going to be a little different, knowing that South Carolina historically have kind of hurt our season there from time to time. So I know Kirby and company will have those guys fired up and going into William Bryce Stadium. That is a tough place to play. So those guys got to understand, this is an SEC game. This is the first game of the year to win in the East. So this is a really viable week for our dogs.
I think that's exactly right. I want to talk to you more about the South Carolina game here coming up. And You also mentioned the defensive performance, pitching the shutout. I think there were some key takeaways there from that. You saw Mikael Williams get his first career sack, but also the first sack of the season for Georgia after not getting any of those last Saturday against Oregon. So, Terrence, a lot of this is obviously opponent dependent. We'll say that a lot as we have this conversation. But when you go out today, this is still a Samford team that scored 52 points last year against Florida. And today, they didn't even cross midfield until the late stages of this game. I do take something from the fact that Georgia went out and was as stout as it was defensively, an overmatched opponent, but I think that Georgia made them look every bit as overmatched on defense as they're supposed to. Samford wasn't able to do anything offensively against Georgia today, so this was a Georgia defense as advertised, and I think they deserve some credit probably for that.
Oh, most definitely. They went out. Jalen Carley and company went out and dominated. They did exactly what they needed to do. We didn't give Samford any kind of life or any kind of opportunities to make big plays. So you got to give the defense going out and doing their job. You still got a lot of young guys in. That was probably the objective, is to play as many players as possible just to get everyone some game reps. So we did that. We came out, especially on defense, with no injuries, and now we just got to gear up and get ready for Spencer Rattler and South Carolina.
Terrence Edwards, stay right where you are. We're going to start taking some phone calls there, too. You'll see a link in the comment section, whichever video platform you're watching on. We'll invite you on. If you're on hold, stay where you are. We'll try to get to as many of these as we can here tonight. And we'll also interact with you live here on video there as well, including Terry, who joins us here on the Dog Nation postgame show, presented by the UGA bookstore. Terry, 33-0, that's the final score. What did you think of the Dogs this afternoon against Samford?
LBA, I'm a little disappointed in the all the field goals we had to kick when we got inside the red zone. What did we stall, 5 times there?
Yeah, I think you're right about that. There were some stalls there in the red zone. How about the rest of the takeaway from you there, Terry? What else did you see?
Well, I'm glad to see we kept them off the scoreboard. Shutouts are always good. But a little disappointed in the offense there in the red zone. That's my biggest takeaway.
I appreciate that, Terry. Thanks for being a part of the conversation. And I think you're touching on something that's important. Terrence, you want to go back to last year. Georgia was one of the top 10 scoring teams in the country. They were like 38, 39 points per game. But there was really an opportunity for even more of those points. Georgia only 65th best last year in trips in the red zone, the percentage of those red zone trips that resulted in touchdowns. So that was one of those things that made last week so special. Not only did Georgia score touchdowns on 7 consecutive possessions to begin the game, but a lot of that was like red zone trips where you really paid off with that touchdown. And I don't make a big deal about that necessarily today in terms of what it means for the season-long goals for Georgia or anything like that. But I do kind of agree with the point that Terry's bringing up here. No disrespect to Hot Pod, but when he was such a, Podlesny, the kicker, when he's such a big factor early in the game, that was kind of speaking to some red zone trips that kind of stalled out, and that's a little bit more of a reminder of some of what you didn't like last year, otherwise national championship season. But one of the few blemishes for Georgia a year ago were some kind of stalled out trips when you made it to the red zone. And from that standpoint, I think Terry, the caller there a moment ago, is zeroing in on something that's pretty important, that when you get inside the 20, you've got to be able to finish those drives off with touchdowns.
Oh, most definitely. I know the first 2 possessions, especially the first possession, Stetson wasn't as sharp as he was last week. He missed a few throws, and that's on offense. They got to go out and put touchdowns on the board and not 3. It's always good to get points, but like Terry said, and I agree with it wholeheartedly, that we cannot kick field goals. We have to go and convert those opportunities into touchdowns, and that's what we did last week. But to be the team that we want to be, we need to convert those 3s into 7.
And if a couple of those early in the game were touchdowns and a couple of times you had a chance to really find the end zone and just didn't, then maybe the overall vibe around this game is probably a little bit different. I want to be clear here. I don't know that anybody's, upset or angry or mad. Just maybe you kind of hoping for something a little bit more, something a little bit more energized. And in the early stages, a couple of those hot pod field goals, had they turned into touchdowns, then I think that the sort of overall vibe might be a little bit different. Terrence, I also want to bring up this with you. It was something Kevin Drummer brings up in our Facebook comment section. That's the play of Amarius Mims. That Georgia's pretty liberal right now in terms of how it's substituting its offensive linemen. This is something that a lot of college teams don't do. Historically, you're not rotating offensive linemen the way that you rotate defensive linemen or maybe players other positions. But Georgia right now feels pretty comfortable doing that. Mims coming into the game. I think that Warren Erickson got a chance to play some at center today. That, Georgia right now is playing 7 or 8 guys along the offensive line, and Mims, who's not technically listed as a starter on this team right now, would be starting for virtually everybody else. And so, you got to use him or lose him in this transfer portal age, and obviously Mims considered transferring during the offseason. What do you think of what you're seeing from Amarius Mims right now and the fact that Georgia would seem to have more offensive linemen than you can play at one time, and in this modern age that we're in is choosing to kind of rotate them more than we've kind of seen offensive lines do in the past?
Yes, I think it's there's two sentiments to this conversation right here. Now with the transfer portal and kids not playing, they're just going to hop in and portal and just transfer. So now you got to make some concessions and figure out a rotation to get all these kids on the field. But then on the other hand, I think we got 3 NFL offensive tackles. I think all 3 of those guys are going to get an opportunity to be high draft pick. So if you got those type of guys on there, why not get those guys in their rotation? Because you never know when one is going to get hurt and you're going to need the other one. So let's get all of them experience. Let's get them into a rotation, a rhythm with offensive line, because we all know if the offensive line is not in sync, then we have a problem. All 5 of those guys have to be on the same page, and they rotating those guys and getting all those experience. Game rep is a little different than practice rep. So on one hand, you have to. On the other hand, I think it's a good thing that we do have 3 tackles that we believe in.
I think that's a really good point. And in Amarius Mims' case, this is a guy that, the fact that he's not technically considered a starter, I don't think is a knock on him. I think it speaks to more of what Georgia thinks it has in Warren McClendon, what it thinks it has in Broderick Jones. But no one's ever said that somehow Mims is less than the prospect we thought he was when he was a 5-star signee with the class of 2021. We've got Ray hanging on here on the Dog Nation video channels, joining us on this live interactive show. Ray, 33-0 was the final. What was your takeaway from the Dogs here this evening? We may have lost Ray. I'm not hearing him. Ray, are you there? Go ahead if you are. And Ray, you might need to unmute yourself if you want to join us. You may have to, when you're called onto the air, you may have to click that unmute button so we can hear you. And it could be we don't have Ray here anymore. So we'll invite you to click that link and be a part of the show. And Ray, if you want to hop back on, we'll give you a chance to weigh in with your thoughts here coming up in just a little bit. Dog Nation Postgame Show presented by the UGA Bookstore here this evening, live at the UGA Bookstore. Of course, don't forget, coming up in a couple of weeks, great autograph signings, including we have somebody with us, but we'll obviously have a great autograph signing coming up here in a couple of weeks when it comes to the UGA Bookstore. I think we have Ray back. Ray, hold on. Let me finish this, and we'll get back to you here in just a moment. The point is, UGA Bookstore, great autograph signing coming up in just a couple of weeks. And obviously, if you're here in Athens right now, you want to stop by, they're still down there selling some great-looking UGA apparel. You can come in and see that first floor, all those great, famous makers with that great-looking UGA gear. You can get that there at the UGA Bookstore. Ray is with us, and he's ready to go. Ray, what's your thought on the Dogs here tonight?
Well, definitely thought that, didn't have that real focus that you wanted to see on offense, which I guess, like Edward said, is to be expected with the team that you was playing. But one thing I definitely wanted to see was more targets for Big O in the red zone. He's definitely a mismatch nightmare for anybody that we play against. And the fact that, we don't see those targets in the red zone is always kind of confusing to me. I definitely thought this was a game to where you may have started seeing that more, to get him more into the rhythm of the offense, especially when it's time to score a touchdown.
Yeah, Ray, and I don't know if you saw this, and I'm sure you remember, he almost has that one moment where he does connect with the touchdown with Stetson Bennett. Bennett probably overthrew him a little bit, probably just threw the ball a little too hard. Darnell got his hands on it, and that was going to be a touchdown. It's like, if you can connect there on that, then maybe the overall vibe of the game is different. Now you're talking about, approaching 40 points, and Washington, who's obviously earned the right to be a target in the red zone, he gets kind of like the highlight play you like to see him get. He obviously had a handful of catches here today, but if Stetson was able to connect with him right there, that would have been one of those moments that I think maybe made some people kind of feel a little more I guess, energized by what happened today had Bennett been able to connect with Darnell in the end zone right there. Ray, we appreciate your call. And how about that from you, Terrence, from the point there of seeing him targeting the red zone? That was probably one of those throws today that, overall Stetson Bennett had a pretty good day, 300 yards passing. He's going to be right there just under 10 yards per attempt on the day. So Bennett certainly did a lot well when it comes to throwing the football. But our buddy William Perry, by the way, a longtime Dog Nation guy, stops by with a nice little gift for us here. We'll unwrap that and see what that is here in a moment. But, Terrence, how about that from the caller there, Ray, a moment ago, the fact that on an otherwise pretty good day from Bennett from a statistical standpoint, had a chance to connect with Darnell Washington in the end zone, not able to do that right there. That would have been a nice play for Georgia to be able to connect on, would it not have been?
Oh, it would have been. I agree with Ray that you do have a weapon like Darnell who's 6'7", 6'8", 280 pounds. That will be a mismatch problem for a lot of players. So I would like to see Darnell get more targets in the red zone because he's so big, he's so strong, and he has natural hands. So maybe we just didn't want to show it today. Maybe it's something we're going to continue to do down the line to evolve this offense. I don't know, but I think Darnell is someone that we definitely need to target more in the red zone and probably line him up and throw a couple of fades to against smaller defenders, or just use his body. I think Stetson overthrew him today. It's kind of hard to overthrow a 6'8" big target like Darnell, but that's something that I think we will and should explore as the season continues.
Ryan M's got an interesting comment on YouTube. I want to read that in a moment, but how about another point to kind of build off what Ray was saying there a moment ago, that while Georgia threw the ball around to a lot of different guys, 15 different Georgia Bulldogs receivers caught the ball today, but I think if Georgia finds itself in a close game, I think that tight ends are going to be a focal point for what Georgia needs to do when it needs to move the chains late in a game that's close. And I think that Darnell Washington's a part of that. I think that Brock Bowers is a part of that. I really came away today saying there's no doubt to me that even in an ensemble cast right now where a lot of different guys are touching the ball for Georgia, a lot of different guys are catching it, that I think that Bowers still has a level of danger for the opposing defense when he has the football in his hand that I still think is kind of unmatched on this roster. And, the overall stat line doesn't look that way. He hasn't had the big explosive, performance the way in which he kind of became famous for that a year ago. But to me, I'm still very impressed with what I'm seeing from him. I liked it today. And I would put Darnell Washington in that same category there, too. That if Georgia really needs to move the chains in a close game at any point in the regular season or as you head towards the postseason, I think tight end is still the place they're looking to do that. And I think it's going to be a Brock Bowers, maybe a Darnell Washington they look to do that with.
Oh, most definitely. Those are two of your better players. And I think Stetson really got a wave leap with both of those guys. And he truly trusts Brock Bowers to make the play. Today was the first time I've seen Brock drop a pass. I know he did drop one against Alabama in the SEC championship game. So this is the first time to see him dropping one in a while. He's normally sure-handed, and I think Stetson's going to give him opportunity each and every time, especially in a crucial situation. We're going to throw it to Brock. I think I trust him, you trust him. I think Dog Nation trusts him to make that play more times than not. And then one thing that, with completing that many passes is the quarterback trusts those guys. So they have had a lot of good practices for Stetson to trust those guys to give them an opportunity to catch passes. And that's going to help down the line when there is a big situation and a team decides to double cover Brock. And he has the faith in those other guys to make plays because they're making plays early in the season.
Ryan M. over on YouTube asked an interesting question. If you want to go back to Tuesday, Terrence, of this past week, Kirby Smart opened his post-practice press conference by saying that Georgia had a bad practice and said that on Monday he thought they had one of the best practices of the season, and they followed that up on Tuesday with what Smart called one of their worst practices of the season. As a guy that obviously played and knows what it takes to compete at the SEC level, do you draw a line from – the coach said you had a bad practice on Tuesday, which is typically speaking a pretty important week of practice, or a day of the practice week. Do you draw a line from that to what kind of feels a little bit like maybe less than, I don't know, I'm going to use the same word I've used before, less than fully energized performance on the field. Do you think those two things could be connected, bad practice leading to kind of a lackluster performance on the field?
You can, yes and no, because there's a lot of times where I play where we had a whole week of great practices and didn't play as well as we practice and vice versa. I think personally Kirby was trying to get to his players through the media, just to say how bad his practice was, just let them know that to be the team that you need to be, you got to be consistent every day of the week. I mean, there's going to be some practices that's not so great. There are going to be moments in practice that's not so great. So I just think Kirby, that was, talking to his players like, come on now, this is the opportunity we have. You can't string together bad practice to be the team that we want to be. I'm sure he conveyed that message to them. Also, he wanted to put it out there to the players that, I'm telling the world that you're not as good as you think you are. And we got to continue to work and continue to get better.
I want to read one comment from Alan, then we'll go back to the phones in just a moment. But Alan Kelly on Facebook says, this was about as boring a game as I've seen in a long time. They played like they were bored. What a sloppy mess that was. No wonder Kirby was mad at practice. I mean, I hate to say this, but Terrence, I think the commenter's kind of right about that. I mean, my biggest takeaway from the whole day was I'm not even sure this game should even be played. If you're playing a short fourth quarter, if, Kirby obviously against one of his coaching mentors today, I don't even know this felt all that much like I'm not sure that this felt all that much like an actual game and a little bit more like a glorified scrimmage. But if a commenter wants to say this was boring, listen, I love Georgia football like no other, and I love college football in general. But this was just barely the Georgia football brand that I've come to expect. I don't necessarily criticize Georgia for it. It just sort of didn't really feel like a real game today to me all that much.
Yeah, those type of games that's hard to get up for. A team that you should win, and the other team is overmatched. It's tough as a 17, 18-year-old kid to go out and get up for this type of game when you spent so much energy on Oregon, and that's all was talked about was Oregon and facing your old defense coordinator, Dan Lanning. So I think the focus and the motivation would be better this week. I think the players understand that all the SEC games are important. Historically, South Carolina has been a thorn in our heel. I think that would be conveyed, and I think, hey, you got to come to practice every week and be consistent. That's the name of the game, is how consistent can you be each Saturday. And today, it felt like a glorified scrimmage, but I can take a lot from this because we got a lot of young guys valuable playing time.
Yeah.
So that goes into helping these young guys, like practice and games are totally different. We got 90,000 people in that scrimmage, so you got to make decisions on the run, and you cannot repeat the plays in the game like you can in practice.
I think that's exactly right. And by the way, if you want to join us, there should be a link in the video comment section of whatever platform that you're on. We'll take your phone calls here. We're going to be at the UGA bookstore doing our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. And if you're watching on video right now, you see a good-looking shirt that I'm wearing. How about the Great Power G, never looked better in this Nike red. This is the kind of stuff that you see on the first floor of the UGA bookstore. They've got as much UGA apparel as you're going to find anywhere. It's really my favorite place to be decked out on game day and for a fun season that's still on its way. Right here at the UGA bookstore. We're up here on the second floor, so if you're in and around Athens, you want to come see us today or after a Georgia game at some point in time in the future here this season, I'd love to do that, and I'll wave at you and say hello when you come by. But if you just want to come by and do some great shopping, that's right down there for you on the first floor there as well, UGA bookstore. Of course, it's the Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore here tonight. Johnny Surfdog on DogNation.com says the red zone criticism is fair. I would have liked to have seen more north-south power running plays there as well. Yeah, I think that the one thing that you can probably come close to saying, that really was deficient for Georgia, because some of it's just lackluster, right? Lackluster kind of ho-hum is not the same thing as criticism. But the one thing I think you can point to and say, that is a spot for criticism, scoring drives that were upended by kind of red zone stall out. You can criticize for that. And, Terrence, I also agree with Johnny's point that while I love seeing McIntosh get involved in the passing game, and I love some of the stuff I saw from Kendall Milton today there as well, who I thought really probably looked like Georgia's most dynamic runner on a running play situation with the ball in his hand today, this is still not quite yet for me the Georgia rushing attack that I want to see. I don't know that punch is being thrown with the same velocity and intensity right now as the passing attack is. That's one of those things where, next week at South Carolina, we'll still talk more about that game before we're done, but with some of that, I do think that you still need to find that, and that's something today that I think that Georgia had a chance to show against an overmatched opponent and probably left a little something to be desired. I kind of agree with Johnny that after 2 games, I am still looking to see a little bit more from this Georgia rushing attack right now.
Oh, most definitely. I'm sitting here kind of smiling a little bit now because, the Dog fans and the Dog Nation want to see more throwing. Now we are throwing the football a little bit more the first 2 games now. We're talking about let's run the ball more. So, but I'm with you. Georgia brand is always going to be being able to line up in an I formation, just using that as an example. We're not lining up in an I formation anymore, but just lining up in an I formation and running the ball down your throat. That's been Georgia brand for a long time. And first 2 games, we haven't had that kind of brand of being a smash mouth football team. We've kind of been a finesse football team. But I would like to see us get back to being able to ground and pound, as the old term say, and be able to move the people off the ball. And I don't think we've moved people off the ball these first 2 weeks.
Joe Garliardi mentioning Stetson Bennett's performance, a little critical of that today. Terrence, we mentioned the touchdown that he could have had to Darnell Washington. There are probably a couple of other moments there, too, maybe some throws that Bennett might like to have had back. But I think the overall numbers for Bennett actually end up looking pretty good. I don't have much in the way of criticism for Bennett. How did you think that Stetson performed today? The overall numbers, 24 of 34 for 300 yards. That's going to put him at 8.8 on the yards per attempt. Had a touchdown, no picks. There are moments in which you could have had more, but I didn't necessarily think that Bennett played a bad game today. I just thought it was kind of in keeping with the overall kind of malaise that Georgia seemed to be in on the heels of the very emotional game last Saturday against Oregon. But did you have any kind of specific criticism of Bennett? Because I think overall he probably played okay, if not, completely perfect in every single instance.
I think the first drive or the first 2 drives, I thought he wasn't as accurate as he normally is. I think the tight end, Darnell, had an opportunity to score. He wasn't as accurate on that throw. And a couple more of the throws that he wasn't as accurate as he normally is. But, I cannot, really complain about his play today. Stetson did what Stetson does, and he made plays with his feet. And he got another rushing touchdown. And he just put us in the right position. And he moved the chains, and that's all I can ask for.
We're going to try to show you some of the Kirby Smart press conference here before we're done on our Dog Nation post-game show presented by the UGA bookstore. We'll also take a look at some of the other games of note around the SEC before we're done here this evening. And if you want to join us to speak to us live, we'll take your calls as we have been throughout the night here on our Dog Nation post-game show there as well. And we'll also continue to read some of these comments, too, for folks who want to comment the old-fashioned way here. Antoine Simpson kind of looking ahead to a Georgia practice regimen coming up the upcoming week, and Antoine's predicting it's going to be pretty intense. And Terrence, there's no doubt about it that most of us didn't think that Oregon was good enough to compete with Georgia, and certainly Georgia proved how true that was last Saturday. We knew for a fact that Samford wasn't. South Carolina did lose today to Arkansas, but this is still Williams-Brice Stadium. You yourself know how tough that venue can be, and maybe moving into week 3 here, maybe that's kind of the right thing for Georgia right now, to be on the road against a pretty tough SEC opponent, or at least a tougher SEC opponent than what they played here this Saturday. And maybe for Kirby, who himself said it wasn't a great practice at least one day last week, maybe the nature of going on the road in conference play for the first time this season, maybe that'll bring an extra step to the pace for Georgia here this week. I would imagine this SEC game probably comes at a pretty good time after what we kind of all saw today.
Oh, I think so. I think, with the build-up to the Oregon game, being kind of we got that out of the way. We was the national darlings. People gushed over us and telling us how good we are, using, Nick Saban's favorite phrases. You can't read the rat pores and get into the rat pores. And I'm not saying that the players did, but just it's tough getting up now for a game for Samford when you know that physically you are better. Now I think Kirby and company is going to treat this week like we lost. You go into Williams-Brice Stadium, the first SEC game of the year. this is where our season starts. This is where our first goal is to win the SEC East. That's the first goal, and this is the first step. This is the first team that's trying to hold us back from repeating as being SEC East champ. So the practice regimen is probably going to be amped up. I think Kirby's probably going to be amped up along with those coaches to get these kids focused and prepared.
Let's check in with Greg here on the Dog Nation video channels. He joins us live here on the Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. Greg, what did you see from what you saw from the Dogs here this evening? Greg, are you with us? I can't tell if Greg is muted or if he's just not with us, so we'll see if we can get him up and running. And if you want to join us, still got some time to do that. We'll take a few more of your phone calls there as well, and we'll continue to read some of those there as well. So Greg is here, but he's muted. Greg, take yourself off mute, and we'll be able to hear what you want to say about the Dogs here tonight. 33-0 over Samford. How did you feel about the game, Greg? So Greg's still maybe dealing with a little bit of a mute situation. I'm not hearing him. So we'll read some more comments. And for folks who want to pop in here and be a part of the show, got some more time to do that. And we'll read some of your comments there as well. John Foster checks in to say the offensive line isn't opening up holes. The running backs are legit. Kirby isn't happy with our run blocking right now for sure. You know, Terrence, maybe John's right about that, but I don't quite know. That was my read on the situation today. And listen, I'm not going to pretend to be an X's and O's expert, and I'm certainly not going to break down game film from something I was watching happen in real time. I'm definitely not going to do that. But in terms of maybe the lack of explosive runs right now, I don't know that I would say I thought the run blocking was the problem there on that, especially when George got those tight ends. They're also putting in the into the blocking scheme there as well. It'll be interesting to see if Kirby says anything about that in the post-game press conference. But to my eyes, watching the game in real time, I thought there were some holes open. I thought the overall blocking was pretty good. I thought a couple times today, a Georgia running back or two, maybe didn't take full advantage of that. Did you have much of an opinion on that in terms of if you're looking to see more from the running game, is that more of offensive linemen need to open holes, or is that more of running backs need to burst through those holes?
It could be a combination of both. And if we don't get positive yards running, we all think it's the offensive line, but it's also – running back has keys that they have to monitor as they're running the football. And if they're not hitting their keys, it's going to seem like the offensive line is not hitting their holes. That's just something now we just got to get back to the drawing board, got to figure out what running play best suits our running backs. And those running plays right now, it's been putting the ball in the running back hands in space. But I'm sure Kirby and company is going to want to be able to pound the football. I think that the turning point of the national championship game where we start moving Alabama off their spot. We start running the football. James Cooks had that explosive run. So we got to be able to move the pile, just not open holes. We got to be able to move another man off his spot and push him back. And that's what I didn't see. I saw holes, but I didn't see our offensive line forcefully pushing their guys back.
Let's try Greg again. Greg, you're on the Dog Nation post-game show here, presented by the UGA bookstore. Go ahead and unmute yourself and let us know what you think tonight.
Hi, can you hear me now?
I sure can.
Great. So I actually
yes, sir. We can hear you just fine.
I wanted to put a little bit more of a positive spin on what we saw today, because I think if you separate out the offense and the defense, obviously everyone is going to be focusing on the 33 points and feel a little bit disappointed by that. But not only did the defense pitch a shutout, when you look inside the numbers, it's really spectacular. Like, they only took 2 first downs. Samford didn't even challenge our quarterbacks, and this is 2 games in a row that the opposing quarterback didn't even try to challenge our cornerbacks, really. It looks like the defensive backfield is going to be just made of golden statues by the end of the year. And there's not a lot to complain about on that half of the ball. And on the offensive side of the ball, we really moved it well between the 20s. Right? The issue really was, I think, in the red zone that everybody's been talking about. But if you go back and look at it, I think Monken was calling a really vanilla game. And I think he was challenging the offensive players to just execute. And this is going to give Kirby some really good ammunition about the importance of staying focused and the importance of executing, that they can't just go out there and go through the motions and win off their talent. And that may come back to really help us in the long run, even on the offense.
Greg, I think that's a very good call, and I'm glad that you made it. Thanks for being here tonight on the Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA bookstore. And, Terrence, the first point that Greg brings up there, which I think is a really good one, is that you'll get fixated on some of the offensive stuff, but defensively, the shutout with only a couple first downs yielded and the level of dominance that it shows. And I know some people are going to want to kind of write it off because it's just Samford from the FCS. But when you add this to only giving up 3 points to a team that's not an FCS team, Oregon from a week ago, that came in ranked number 11 and could very well be ranked again before the year is done, I think this is a pretty big message through 2 weeks that this huge drop-off defensively that some folks expected Georgia to have, I don't know that you're going to have that. I don't know that's coming here at any point in time. I would say this is still a Georgia, a Georgia defense that could still rank as the nation's best by the end of the year. And I think the message kind of sent here through the first couple of games is this is still a Georgia defense that's going to need to be taken very, very seriously because of the combination of veteran players, young players who've stepped up in a big way. I think Greg's making a pretty good point that in light of all of this, you can't lose sight of just how effective Georgia was defensively, and it's really the point of surrender for Samford today, a team that scored 52 against Florida last year, could not find the end zone, really couldn't find a fresh set of downs today. The Georgia defense does deserve to be lauded for that.
Oh, most definitely. When you don't give up any points to anyone, that's an accomplishment. And I think the test is going to be next week to be able to stop Spencer Rattler. I think this is probably going to be the biggest test to date, being able trying to stop South Carolina. I think they did put up 30 points today, and Spencer Rattler is a talented quarterback. You could debate how good he is or isn't. He is a talented quarterback. So it's going to be a big test for our defense next weekend. I think this is the opportunity for these guys to really make another statement. I think we made one against Oregon. Now this is an SEC opponent. So let's go out and try to make a statement against them as well.
So I'm doing the math in my head. It's almost 8 now. We've been on pretty close to an hour. We're going to wrap up here in a few minutes. Did Georgia play this game in 3 hours today? I realized it was, a shorter fourth quarter, but that in itself may be the most amazing thing. Terrence, this is a sport where games regularly go like 4 hours. I'm sitting here doing the math on the time in my head. Did Georgia dispatch of Samford in like 3 hours flat today? Because that's about as quick a football game as you're going to see in 2022, I think.
Oh, most definitely. But I was able to flip to the Texas A&M App State game and Tennessee and Pitt. I was still able to watch some of those games, and I felt like those games started before the Georgia game, and there's still a lot of time left in regulation, especially for the Tennessee-Pittsburgh game. So this game was very short. I understand the shortening of the fourth quarter. I wonder if the game was tight. Would the fourth quarter still been 12 minutes? We got out injury-free. Hopefully, A.D. Mitchell is play next week. Overall take, man, we got a lot of young guys experienced today. And, we are complaining about the touchdowns that we didn't get. So I'm just flipping like the last caller, like the special teams. They're 1/3 part of the game. And they did their job today, kicking the field goals. And I know we missed it 55-54. It was online, just didn't have enough legs. So I'm going to give a shout out to the special team because that is an important operation of the game.
We're going to have Kirby Smart here coming out in a couple of moments. We'll hear his post-game thoughts from the Georgia win against Samford. While we're waiting on Coach Smart to and the press conference from Kirby Smart, let's also go cruise around the SEC courtesy of Royal Caribbean here and take a look at some of the scores of note of games that are in action right now and some of what we've seen throughout the day. And I guess, Terrence, let me begin with this. Alabama beats Texas earlier. Quinn Ewers, the Texas quarterback, knocked out of the game, but it was not really an impressive showing for Alabama. You think Georgia was lackluster in winning a game 33-0. How about Texas in a spot where they were favored 3 touchdowns in Austin? I guess you give Texas some of the credit for that. But, this is an Alabama team today that certainly did not seem to have the same fire from which we've come to expect from it. What did you think of Alabama getting a a much bigger scare than I think most of us anticipated from Texas today.
One of the key components to Alabama over the years is how dominant their offensive line have been. And just watching, the game today, their offensive line did not look very good today. They didn't open in the holes. We was talking about the holes being open, didn't open in the holes. The receivers there, I didn't see a lot of separation from those guys. That could be a game plan, or that could just be give Texas some credit. So I didn't see anything from that. I didn't see anything that was very explosive or scary with the Alabama team today. Will probably the best player in college football still, but today it just wasn't that we're used to. They just didn't scare me today, and that could be one game, but they just don't have that oomph that I thought they would have.
And then another shocking score. This one even more shocking, the fact that Appalachian State, fresh off a wild game last Saturday where they scored 40 points in the fourth quarter and lost at home to UNC, goes to College Station and wins outright against Texas A&M, 17-14 the final. And for Jimbo Fisher, the thing that's plagued him thus far in his A&M career is just really pretty putrid offense. And this is a thing that Fisher at one point in time would have been famous for. Tutor of quarterbacks, a lot of guys that he'd worked with have gone on to be first-round picks. But they haven't found that offensive success at Texas A&M at all. And today, another example of this. I think that Fisher has been a really popular coach with Aggies fans. They obviously have the nation's #1 recruiting class this past cycle. They've seemingly leveraged NIL better than most programs have. But, Terrence, this is going to change things a little bit. This is not a good spot to lose to an App State team that just lost at home the week prior to that. I got to imagine there's going to be some reverberations in College Station after a game like this in which A&M loses and plays really pretty poor offensively in that loss. What do you make of Texas A&M losing?
You said it right, Bill. This is a shocker. A 6th-ranked team losing to a non-ranked team, Appalachian State. Traditionally not a power program, and A&M coming with high expectations. Jimbo Fisher has been a quarterback whisperer when he was at Florida State and at Auburn. So this is not a good look right now. I'm not saying that he's on a hot seat, but he's going to have to answer for this loss. And now I know Aggie Nation is going to be wondering, what's going on. And in the recruiting world and everything you do right now in college football is about recruiting. This doesn't look well for those guys that you're looking to bring into your program later.
Did you get to see much of the South Carolina-Arkansas game earlier today? I know our own Mike Ripford has been there in Fayetteville covering the game, and we'll read about that at DogNation.com. But being here in Athens, I didn't get a chance to see much of that prior to this kickoff. And if you did get to see it, what did you make of Spencer Rattler and the Gamecocks? Obviously, they lose the game, but it's a tough spot on the road. How did you feel about the South Carolina game if you got to see much of that today?
I didn't get to see any besides the last drive. But like I said last week, I think all Dog Nation is kind of undercover Arkansas fans because of Pittman, and we all know how much he meant to Georgia, how much he did for Georgia, and he's just a lovable guy. So that's the big win for Pitt Boss and the Arkansas Razorbacks.
If you guys had a chance to see the game yourself, watching on TV today, maybe put some comments in the comments section about how you felt South Carolina looked, obviously with Georgia going to Columbia next week. We'll get your thoughts there on that. I'll also mention Tennessee over Pitt, and kind of a wild game, kind of a back-and-forth affair there a bit, but ultimately the Vols do pull away, win 34-27, and in action right now, Florida on top of Kentucky. That's early second quarter. Gators have a 3-0 lead there on that. That is our cruise around the SEC, courtesy of Royal Caribbean. Don't forget to go to RoyalDogs.com, and you can find out more about the second-ever cruise with Dog Nation coming up this upcoming spring in April as Dog Nation takes the seas again with Royal Caribbean on Independence of the Seas. Our good friend Jessica Slater helping you get booked up on all that with Royal Caribbean. We're going to be going to Nassau in the Bahamas. We're going to Perfect Day, Coco Cay. We're going to have a great, great time in April, same week the NFL draft, just like before. And we want you to be a part of it there, too. So a lot of folks have already booked their staterooms. We're encouraging you to do the same thing. So check out RoyalDogs.com. Jessica Slater, you can also call her. Her number on the screen in front of you, and you can be a part of us with the great second ever Cruise with Dog Nation coming up in spring of 2023 in April. RoyalDogs.com, the website to go to for more details on that. We'll give you a chance to also continue to weigh in on Georgia and Samford, what you saw from the game today. We'll have some final thoughts from all of you before we sign off. But for now, it's the head coach that you care about hearing from, Georgia coach Kirby Smart, from his post-game press conference a few minutes ago. What did he see from the game? What was his evaluation? Let's hear some of that live from the UGA bookstore on the Dog Nation post-game show.
Well, just want to say thoughts and prayers going out with Claude. He's up watching, I think it's his daughter-in-law getting married, his niece getting married, and couldn't be with us. This is the first time Claude hadn't been with us in a long time. So I hate that Claude's not here, but family comes first. I want to thank our fans for the great job they did coming out today. I was a little worried about the weather and thought that we might not have great turnout because of the weather, and they came and they were loud, and that always makes for a special feeling for our players, which I think is important for them to feel good about that. A lot of respect for Hatch and the job he's done in terms of coaching at Samford. Their kids played really hard. A lot of respect for those guys. They were outmanned and outmatched, and they played really hard and physical today and did a good job of doing the best job they could. So we got to play better. We didn't play our best game, and we know that, and our kids acknowledge that, and we start the SEC gauntlet next week. So that all opened it up.
Okay, we have any questions?
Coach, what do you think about the red zone effort today? 7 for 4 field goals, was that a big issue, I guess, for you today?
Yeah, anytime you get in red zone for us, it was a priority for offense and defense to be elite in red zone. You know, we talked all off season about our defense last year was pretty good in red zone. Offense didn't score the touchdowns they needed to, and they did that in the first game, and we did it today. So we'll have to go back and watch the tape, and we got to get better at that, because you can't win games just kicking field goals.
Kirby saw AD come off the field after that first drive. Any update on him?
Yeah, he looks okay. Probably could have gone back in, but we held him at that point, and he's got an ankle.
Kirby, how much, or if at all, do you feel your defense did better today in terms of communication and getting calls in and things of that nature?
Hard to say. You know, I don't know that you can get a great evaluation. They were outmanned up front. They had to get rid of the ball quick. They don't have the dynamic guys we play against on the perimeter. They were going to get the ball out quick, so it's hard to evaluate. They tried to slow the game down once we got ahead, and if you saw, they just ran the clock a long time and shifted. So it wasn't a great evaluation for us in terms of taxing us. And we had a lot of 3 and outs. So when you get 3 and outs, it's hard to sustain drives.
Kirby, you guys were able to have something of a 2-minute drill right before halftime. Just how valuable is that, especially early in the year, to kind of get a test like that, trying to score with them a lot of time?
Well, it's great, especially if you capitalize on it, and we're able to get the ball back and able to get a shot at the end zone. Would like to have gotten, if we execute one play better, we may have a shot at the field goal. And I think we followed the snap. I couldn't tell what happened, and it kind of wasted a play for us, and we lost a lot of time on that play.
Kirby, what was your impressions of Dylan Bell and Jackson Meeks? They got in pretty early and played a lot.
Both those guys have done a good job at practice. They continue to improve. We are continuing to grow that room and get some depth with some guys that can go play for us.
It seemed like, Coach, you had a lot more power.
All right, good stuff there from Kirby Smart, the post-game press conference. You're hearing that here on the Dog Nation video channels. If you want to hear the rest of the press conference, you can go to Dog Nation on YouTube and watch it in its entirety. But I'll bring you back in, Terrence Edwards, on a reaction to Kirby Smart and some final thoughts here there as well. Liking what he saw from Dylan Bell. We talked about that a little earlier. You also saw Jackson Meeks getting involved early. Meeks coming into the game because of the A.D. Mitchell injury. And I guess to kind of throw a bunch of questions at you at once, also sounds like a pretty favorable update on A.D. Mitchell's health situation, too. So a lot from Kirby there, feeling good about the performance of young guys like Bell and Meeks, younger guys like Meeks, true freshman, and Dylan Bell. Nice to hear Kirby calling them out for a pretty good performance here today as they provide that wide receiver depth for UGA.
Yes, I think that's very important. Like I say, if one man goes down like A.D. Mitchell, the next man got to be able to step up, and production cannot drop off. Trust factor cannot drop off. So, like Kirby said, we have to continue to grow that room, and Stetson has to be comfortable with all the receivers because at some point someone's going to have to make a play in a crucial game. And if you don't have that trust, Stetson don't have that trust, then it's not going to be as successful as it needs to be. So I definitely agree with Coach Smart about being able to grow that wide receiver room.
Also, you heard Kirby not mince words about dissatisfaction with the red zone offense, and that's something that our audience has brought up tonight. You and I have talked about that there, too, and you heard Kirby say directly, you're not going to win games kicking field goals, that Georgia had to settle for too much of that today, even against the overmatched opponent, and a game that otherwise will be pretty quickly forgotten. Smart pretty clear that's not the standard that Georgia wants to set offensively. Too many drives stalled out. We all know that, but the fact that Smart spoke to it so directly, that I would imagine, Terrence, gives some comfort to some Georgia fans to know that Kirby takes that issue as head-on as he just did.
Right. I mean, if you saw the Texas-Alabama game today at 12 o'clock this morning, you can see that Texas had an opportunity to win that game, but you cannot continue to kick field goals versus a great opponent. So once we get into opponents that are equal as talented as us, we got to be more specific, better in the red zone, and just not kick field goals, because that would get you beat. You can't let a team hang around when you're a better team that day. And Texas did that today, and we can't allow that once we get into a situation where it comes down to red zone execution.
As we get ready to wrap up here, don't forget, we'll be back here in 2 weeks' time when Kent State from the MAC comes here to Athens, and we'll obviously have a great time after the game from the UGA bookstore. But before the game, UGA bookstore, also exciting things there as well, including Richard LeCount signing autographs there that day, along with Malcolm Mitchell, Vince Dooley, Buck Bellew, all on hand there as well. So a lot of great former dogs here at the UGA bookstore in 2 weeks when Georgia's back in Athens to take on Kent State. And, of course, you want to get loaded up and stocked up with some great UGA apparel. We had a great Georgia fan came by a moment ago, and I was talking to him during the Kirby Smart press conference. He had his Peter Millar shirt. He had all the great-looking stuff that he's getting ready to take over to that cash register and be stocked up and dressed up for the rest of the season. And you love to see dog fans looking good, and there's no better way to look good than with that great apparel from the UGA bookstore. You can see them and see all of it each and every game here in Athens, or you can do your own shopping online at UGAbookstore.com. You can check that out there for more on that. And, Terrence, I guess I'll kind of leave you with a question here tonight, and this is something we addressed on Dog Nation Daily to begin the week, and I guess we'll still be talking about this moving forward. Given the fact that Georgia, even in a somewhat, lackadaisical type day today, still winning 33-0 after having won 49-3 in week one, knowing that Alabama in a lot of ways was lucky to beat Texas today, and Ohio State in week one beats a Notre Dame team that goes and loses to Marshall here today. Is there any doubt in your mind right now that Georgia is the number one team in the country and ought to be ranked that way next week?
I think so. I think we are the best team in the country right now. Do I want the rankings to switch? I personally don't. I want Alabama to continue to be the kings. And I want to feel going into the SEC championship game, them being one, we being two, we knocking them off the hill again. That's just my like to do. I don't think we are the number one team. I think we are the most talented team top to bottom. But I would like to stay on top, and us being able to hunt them and not being a hunter. I know Kirby said we will not be hunted, but when you're that number one, that top dog, everyone is going to come at you even more. I know we're ranked number 2 and everyone's going to come at us. But I just like Alabama being there because they're so spoiled and entitled that they will probably boycott college football if we become number 1 and they slip to number 2.
That's good stuff, Terrence. That's a great way to close it out here tonight. Georgia gets a win 33-0. Terrence Edwards, great evaluation. He's going to be with us each and every game here this season on our Dog Nation postgame show presented by the UGA Bookstore. For those of you that joined us with your calls tonight, we certainly appreciate that there as well. And for the entire team back in our Atlanta studios, getting the Kirby Smart press conference up and running for us, and for the folks here in Athens who helped us collect that, we appreciate great work here to make all that happen there too. Georgia wins 33-0. Some other big powers around college football, nowhere near as lucky today. So go to dognation.com, stay close to the website, read all of the reaction post-game to what goes down here, and then see me on Monday when I'm back for Dog Nation Daily as we break it all down and get ready to go on the road into hostile territory next Saturday against the South Carolina Gamecocks in Williams-Brice Stadium. We'll see you there for that then, including here on the Dog Nation post-game show, and a lot of coverage between them to get you ready for it. For the entire folks and the entire staff here at Dog Nation, including Terrence Edwards, I'm Brandon Adams saying good night, everybody. We'll see you next time here on the Dog Nation postgame show, presented by the UGA Bookstore.